Hello, this is Anthony Giannattasio, and this is my Anthropology 315 final presentation on my paper about the death penalty. So, to begin, I want to define what the death penalty is. The death penalty is also known as capital punishment, and that's the punishment of execution administered to someone legally convicted of a capital crime, such as murder. So, as of today, the death penalty is used in 35 states, and the other 15 states have abolished it. There are many ways that the death penalty is administered. So, to begin, they're used to hanging, firing squad, the gas chamber, the electric chair, and the most humane method of execution, lethal injection. Lethal injection is the most commonly used method of execution we use here in the United States. And right from there, the controversy arises. So, we consider that executing someone to be humane, so it's okay. But in reality, this is a strong reason why it should be abolished, or a strong reason why people argue that it should be abolished. It's because it violates our Eighth Amendment rights against cruel and unusual punishment. There are many other issues arising in the death penalty that have been present since the 1980s, when it was argued that the death penalty was more frequently used when the victim of the crime was white. So we can argue that the death penalty is biased against African American Latinos, and that people of these groups are more likely to receive the death penalty based solely on the attributes of their victims. So to begin, the first legal execution as a form of punishment for a crime was documented in Virginia during the early 1600s. So we've been killing people for a very long time. There are a large number of black and minority groups that are disproportionately on death row today. And it is argued that our entire criminal justice system is systematically biased against these minorities, and as a result, there is a higher percentage of minorities on death row, meaning they have a higher conviction rate and are being put on death row more frequently. The economic impact of death penalty is also a concern, as the cost of keeping an individual on death row has increased over the years. So there are many factors that affect why death row is becoming so expensive. Everything from the appeals, which these offenders get to fight in court and say that we didn't convict this crime, and try and seek freedom, along with simply trying to get their sentence reduced to a life sentence. So these people are fighting for their lives every day. So the problem with that is that now they're spending 9 to 10 years on death row, and every time they go to court, there's money paid by taxpayers for the DNA evidence processing, for attorneys, and for the many levels of the appellate courts. So there are many reasons why not to administer the death penalty to someone. And in my research, I learned that offenders who had committed a crime against a white individual are more likely to be convicted on death row if they were black themselves or a minority themselves. So meaning that, going on what I said before, is that if they are an ethnic minority and they commit a capital crime against a white person, they are much more likely to receive the death penalty than their white counterparts if the roles were reversed. So now to talk about the flip side, there are many arguments for the death penalty as well, which is why there are 35 states that do support it. So capital punishment was adopted from Americanized European policies many years ago. So if they believe the ideology is that they believe that victims' families received some kind of closure from the offender receiving the harshest of punishments. And in 1972, they actually abolished the death penalty, but it was correlated that it had no effect. One of the many other pros of the death penalty is that while the victim who was murdered may not be able to seek retribution at the hands of the offender, the victim's family can now seek the death penalty against against the offender and gain closure for what happened to their loved one. One of the main ideologies of the death penalty is getting even, an eye for an eye. If you murder someone, then your life should be taken away from you to make things even. The problem with the numbers about this is that in the death penalty cases, the more black a defendant is perceived to be, the more worthy of death. So are we really getting even, or are we really targeting someone because they are a racial and ethnic minority? And there's a fine line between that. So to finish, I wanted to say that it is easily argued that the death penalty should be abolished because it targets, we've proven statistically that it targets racial and ethnic minorities, and that these people are more likely to be convicted on death row if their victim was white. Also, we have to understand that putting someone to death costs way more than, and the cost of putting someone to death outweighs getting the offender what they deserve. Lastly, I believe that by abolishing the death penalty, we as a society would be doing a great good, and we would be sparing many African American and Latinos from suffering cruel and unusual punishment in our society. Thank you. This has been my Anthropology 315 final presentation.